Hello, and today I will be showing you my NHC project about the creation of Pong. In 1972, when Pong was invented, it broke the barrier, becoming the first ever successful home video game in history, and this started the video game industry. In America, there are many games that people play in the United States, such as baseball, soccer, basketball, and many more. But in 1901, ping pong, a game that consisted of two paddles, became a very successful and popular sport all around the world. But there were no other games in the world at this time because no one thought of the idea of a video game. But many more pieces of technology at this time were being made, and that means technology was getting better at this time. Many Americans did not know what video games were, so this was a new experience for them to try out. In the late 1960s, Alan Alcorn started his passion on video games in college, and as he finished college, he started working for Atari and led by Nolan Bushnell. In 1958, Pong was developed by William Higginbotham, but instead of being called Pong, it was called Tennis for Two. But that version of the game was as successful as the later version of the game. William Higginbotham had many issues in creating Tennis for Two, and that's why Tennis for Two wasn't as successful. But a decade and a half later, in the summer of 1972, the actual Pong game was made by Alan Alcorn, Nolan Bushnell, Ralph Baer, Ted Dabney, and many others which created Atari. Pong's origin started in a little bar in Sunnyvale, California, but quickly became very popular around the world. But in the 1970s, there was not much technology that could be used to make a video game such as Pong, and it was much harder to make video games than it is now. The barrier impacted the makers of Pong, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, because the difference between technology now and then is in the 1970s, how much of it they had. Because they didn't have much technology like computers, and they didn't have many because he didn't have much money to pay for them. This negatively affected the Atari company because they didn't have many materials that they could use at this time due to how much money they had. This barrier started in the 1950s when the first version of Pong, Tennis for Two, was made. The creator, William Higginbotham, had multiple problems with creating the game due to the technology they had at the time. The creators of Pong, Nolan Bushnell and Alan Alcorn, have not always been on the same page because they both said that they were the ones who created Pong. But since Nolan Bushnell created the very successful company, he was named the creator of the video game Pong. But no one has ever tried to make a video game ever, and that is why Atari and William Higginbotham were the first to try. The only difference between Tennis for Two and Pong is that Pong was more successful and that it was a home video game, but Tennis for Two wasn't. In 1972, Atari broke the barrier by making Pong and becoming the first successful home video game in history. A home video game is a game that you are able to play at home and you don't have to go out somewhere else, like an arcade, to play it. This meant both children and adults were able to play, but this game was not just playable at your house, but also at arcades. Atari broke this barrier because they wanted to start a new evolution in the video game industry. Also, in 1972, when Pong was made, Ralph Baer made a new system called the Magnavox Odyssey and started the Magnavox Company. And the Magnavox Odyssey would become the very first video game console in the world, and it would start an evolution in the video game console industry. But without Magnavox's permission, Atari used the Magnavox Odyssey to promote their Pong game. This brought Atari and Magnavox into a series of court cases, which Magnavox and Atari would soon settle by saying Atari would be able to produce Pong through the Magnavox Odyssey without any issues. Atari and its employees broke the barrier of becoming the first video game company in history. At this time, anything that was physically made was hard enough, but on a screen was even harder with the technology they had. Because if you compare it from the technology we have now, it has changed a lot. Pong's creators consist of Alan Alcorn, Nolan Bushnell, Ralph Baer, and Ted Dabney. and they all helped make Pong the most successful video game at the time. Alan Alcorn and Nolan Bushnell did receive a lot of recognition on the creation of Pong, but the man William Higginbotham to create the first version of Pong did not get anything for the creation that he started back in the 1950s. The only bad thing that happened to Atari and Pong were the court cases that they had to go through with Magnavox and how they could produce their game, and that their game had to be retired only 2 years after launch. The short-term impact from Pong on the world was that in the next few months after Atari released Pong, Atari became a $1 million to $1 billion company. This also gave more people things to do than just twiddle with their thumbs. It gave many people an idea for the video games that were made later in the 1900s, like Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, and Space Invaders. Pong's success would get it so far that they would start producing Pong not just in America, but all around the world, and Bushnell was rich because of it. Nolan Bushnell's legendary Atari company and its very successful video game Pong was made by both Nolan Bushnell, Alan Alcorn, and all the other creators of Pong, and that making them very rich. Video games at the time were very hard to make, so this brought people a new experience and gave them a brand new way of entertaining themselves at home and at the arcade. The long-term impact from Pong on the world was what it did for video games in the future. Pong paved the way for games like Fortnite, GTA, Minecraft, and much more. Pong's long-term impact in the world has really gave more people things to do than just work all day. Because of Pong, they can have fun, whether that be professionally gaming or just for fun. It wasn't just the video game Pong that impacted the world long term, but it was also the video game company, Magnavox, that they made for us, the Magnavox Odyssey. This game console paved the way for games like Pong did by helping other people make consoles like the PS4, Xbox, Wii, and many more. Pong's creators will forever be in the Video Game Hall of Fame. Ever since Pong, we have had multiple home video games because of it. So because of Pong and being a home video game, it gives us a way so we don't always have to go out if we want to have some fun. Ever since the creation of Pong in 1958 to 1972, the video game industry has grown massively. If we never had Pong, most of us would not be doing much, and the video games of the future may not have never ever happened. Pong's beginning may have been hard, but the outcome of it gave the world many more things to do. So every video game that has been made has some help, one way or another, from Atari's Pong, because without it we wouldn't have video games today. This has shown that one little thing that is successful can go on forever. But even though Pong only lasted 2 years, it will still be the first successful home video game in history. In 1974, only 2 years after Pong's release, it was retired and became very hard to find.